Hey people, how are you doing today? Actually, let me say happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. I'm live on my IG page, so a lot of you probably already know me, but for those of you who don't, my name is Michaela Valletta, also known as the Renaissance Amazon. And once again, I want to say happy Father's Day to all the fathers. For those of you who follow me, you know I'm a daddy's girl, and I'm very passionate about my relationship with my dad and father-daughter relationships and even father-son relationships. And I just want to have a talk today about fathers, okay, the importance of dads, you know, some of my thoughts, things that I've noticed. And I can say for the past couple of days, I've seen conversations on social media, on Instagram, on Clubhouse, where people are saying that they think that Father's Day celebrations should be canceled in schools because it is unfair to black kids, because so many black kids don't have a dad and it's triggering for them and it makes them feel bad, so they should just cancel Father's Day celebrations. I totally disagree with that. Okay, I totally wholeheartedly disagree with that. I also don't like this black narrative, you know. Whatever it is, there could be hood black narratives that black people, you know, all these black men are going to jail, all these black men didn't have fathers. There's a lot of truth to that, right? But there's a lot of people who that's not their story. I can tell you, in my family, there are no broken homes, there are no fatherless children. Nobody in my family on both sides, my mother and my father's side, nobody grew up without their dad. Nobody grew up not knowing who their dad was, okay? And nobody went to jail, okay, either, okay? Nobody went to jail for selling crack or anything like that. So, you know, a lot of times it can depend on the world that you're from. Now, I grew up in Harlem. I grew up in the hood, not in the projects, but in the hood. And, you know, my dad was there every single day of my life. My dad has a lot to do with the kind of woman that I am, okay? Now, let me say I'm a grown-ass woman, very, very grown, okay? So, you know, people forget sometimes. It's funny because people can see me, I'm a dancer, I'm a body scientist, I'm a trainer, I'm a body artist, I pose for photographers. Everything I do has to do with my body. Whether from dancing, from being a trainer, a nutritionist, art model, and I'm also a sacred sexual educator. And everybody is somebody's daughter. You know, you have somebody like Beyonce. Beyonce is a sex symbol. Beyonce shakes and gyrates half naked on stage. But Beyonce's father had a lot to do with her success. And I've noticed that a lot of women who are successful, their fathers are behind them. Look at Venus and Serena, okay? That they have their father to thank for that. And even in situations where the father might have been very abusive, like the Jacksons, right? Which we know that I wouldn't want a father like that, but still, he was the driving force, right? So for me, like, even though in my family there hasn't been a broken home situation, every man that I have dealt with, okay, every man that I've been in a relationship with has had severe daddy problems. Either their father wasn't in their life, or their father was extremely abusive. Like, I mean, beating the mess out of their mother, abusing them. You know, I had an ex who his father gave him a concussion from breaking a peanut butter can over his head. So he had very bad, all my exes have really bad daddy issues. And I used to think daddy issues was only something that affected women, you know, because when I went to college, I remember all of the girls in college who didn't have a good relationship with their dad. I felt like they would get caught up in a lot of dumb shit, you know, like they were always falling in love with any man who was nice to them, they'd fall in love with him. And I would be thinking to myself, like, just because you have sex with a guy and he's nice to you, doesn't mean that you're supposed to be in a relationship with him. Like, you shouldn't have sex with anybody who's not nice to you, so that should be a given. But this whole narrative that women fall in love with everybody they have sex with, a lot of women don't fall in love with everybody they're having sex with. But there are a lot of women with daddy issues, and they're like looking for this father figure. They're looking for love in a relationship because they didn't get it from their dad, okay? And I've seen women with those issues like really get caught up in a lot of dumb shit. Now, that's not to say that there aren't women with fathers who don't get caught up in dumb shit, because that happens too, but it's a much smaller percentage. A lot of my self-esteem comes from my dad. Like, when it comes to love and relationships, I haven't had the best luck. Sometimes I think part of that is, and no offense to anybody, I'm just being real. I think sometimes part of that is because I mostly deal with black men. And I'm not going to say that there are no undamaged black men in the world. There are, but I feel like they're a small percentage, and a lot of them are either taken or they just don't want to build or whatever. But in my relation, and I was never somebody who would write somebody off or whatever. I just noticed that in my relationships that I've had, all of them had severe daddy issues, okay? Their dad didn't care about them. And you know, it's funny because there's this narrative, like, I hear a lot of people saying, you know, they want to have these excuses for why fathers weren't in the home. And they want to talk about society and white supremacy. To me, people can miss me with all that. Like, yeah, that's the case sometimes. But most of the people that I know whose fathers weren't in their life, their fathers don't have a good reason for this shit. They were just lazy. They had other priorities. They didn't give a fuck about their kids. You know what I'm saying? They had other kids that they cared about. And I feel like people who come from those situations, they want to believe so bad that white supremacy or some conspiracy is what got their father out the house, when really their father didn't want to be there because they didn't give a fuck about him. Okay? I don't have a lot of empathy for those excuses. You know, my father stayed in my life. He was there every single day of my life. He had conversations with me. He spent time with me. You know what I'm saying? And he was a black man like everybody else. They had all types of shit on his shoulders, and he didn't run away from his responsibilities. Now, I will say, I do know men, like one of my very best friends, black male. He's a great man, right? And everybody loves this man. Women love him, men love him, kids love him. Everybody loves him, but he, you know, doesn't have a good relationship with his daughter because of his ex-wife, you know, who went out of her way. You know, she's a really evil person. She was a very powerful person, made a lot more money than him, and did a lot to manipulate the daughter and brainwash the daughter, and it's a really bad situation, right? And I think women like that need to be held accountable. I could never be friends with a woman who I know was intentionally keeping her child away from their father. It's like, why would you cause unreputable damage, okay, on a child by doing that? That to me is only okay if the father's a child molester or he's somebody dangerous. You think that he might kill the child or something like that. But because you break up with the father and you guys aren't together, I think that is absolutely horrible for mothers to do that. And I feel like people should not co-sign that shit. But I also feel like people should not co-sign fathers who are piss poor fathers. My dad always said that about his friends. None of my dad's friends. My dad didn't have any male friends who were bad fathers. He refused to. But I see a lot of men who will have male friends who are not being fathers to their children. Their priorities are elsewhere. You know what I'm saying? They're running around chasing chicks and stuff instead of being there for their kids. And a lot of men will turn a blind eye and still be cool with the dude. And it's funny because you see somebody like Future, for example. You know, Future has all these kids. And to me, I don't have an issue with someone who has a bunch of kids with different people. As long as, you know, you're present and, you know, you're still present in those kids' lives. So when people compare like Future to Nick Cannon, I think it's a bad comparison because Future seems like a total asshole. He doesn't seem like he's really there for his kids. He has nasty fights with the mothers of his kids via social media. Nick Cannon, that's not his situation. Nick Cannon doesn't beef with any of the mothers of his. He's never had a public beef or argument with any mother of his child. The women who are having children with Nick Cannon know what they're getting themselves into. None of them have complained at all or had any kind of problem. And if you look at traditional societies, many men had children with different women, and many women had children with different men. That's nature, that's normal. This idea of like strict monogamy and that you have to have all your kids with the same person, that's based on colonialism, you know, and post-colonial thought. So I don't agree with that, right? And I don't have an issue with what Nick Cannon's actions, right? Somebody can say that he's not in the house with them every day. Okay, you know, but a lot of people's parents aren't in the house with them every day. But he still makes an effort to be present, and it seems like he's equally present, at least from outside looking in, and I don't see any issues. And in black society, I'm sorry, like, I've noticed there's a whole lot of black men that they'll be like 50 years old and they're still not ready to have kids, you know, or they're still not ready to build, or they're still confused about what it is that they want, and da-da-da-da. So there got to be some black men like Nick Cannon might be giving gifts to women, okay? So I don't judge that, right? But what I do judge is men who don't do what the fuck they're supposed to do. And I love my dad. Okay, I talk about my dad all of the time. All the time. I am, and every Father's Day, I feel like I've been around people, like the times that I wasn't with my dad. Like I should be with him right now. I was supposed to go to New York yesterday, but I wasn't feeling well. I had a horrible headache yesterday, and I couldn't travel, so I had to extend my trip. I was just in New York for my dad's 80th birthday, right? I'm very close to my dad. If I were to call my dad right now on the phone, and he answers with so much love. My dad expresses so much love to me every single time I speak to him. More so than my mother even, okay? My dad is the super affectionate one. I love my mother too. My mother is a great woman, but sometimes I feel bad because I feel like I talk about my dad even more, but I love them both, and I can see the balance that they brought, you know what I'm saying? Because they brought different things into my life. If I would have been raised with just my mom, I wouldn't be the same person. If I'd been raised with just my dad, I wouldn't be the same person, right? But one thing about my dad is that, I always say that he's the first feminist I ever met. Now, a lot of people don't like the term feminist, especially in the black community. They act like it's a dirty word. Now, I'm going to say, and that feminists destroyed the black community. I hate that bullshit rhetoric. But I will say that there's different kinds of feminists, right? And they don't all agree. But just as a general statement, without getting super deep into this shit, it's just about equal rights for women. You know what I'm saying? And just like black people want equal rights or whatever. That doesn't mean that a woman is a man or whatever. But it's like, in the 80s, women couldn't get, it wasn't until the 80s where women could get a loan to open up a business, okay? They had to have a husband, like we're a damn child or something. Like my dad is the type of person, he's not with that shit. My dad is the type of person that when I was a little girl, he pointed out a Muslim woman to me who was all covered up. She had all this covered up to her eyes. And my dad said to me, you see that? That's a woman who doesn't want to be free. Because she's in America, one of the countries where women have some of the most rights and freedom than they do anywhere else in the world. But that woman chooses to walk around all covered up in that shit because a man told her to do that. And my dad said to me, fuck that shit. Don't ever do something just because a man told you to do it. Think for yourself. Do what makes sense to you. When I was growing up, my dad was always teaching me about how to protect myself in case a man ever tried to attack me. Okay? Ever since I could think, he was teaching me different things. And to this day, I'm 40 years old, he still does that. He still gives me lessons of how to cut a man with a razor, how to hold my razors, how to hold my knives, how to walk with it out, and ways to seriously injure a man if he ever puts his hands on me without my permission. My dad has given me tips on what to do if a man tried to rape me, all kinds of shit. But number one, he's taught me how to avoid it to begin with, right? So luckily, I've never been in those situations where I've had to use that. But I can recognize certain temperaments in men where I'm like, this man seems like he could be dangerous. Let me get away from him. I get quiet. Let me get away from him. Let me exit. Because I was raised with my father every single day of my life, I know the difference between being protected by a man and being controlled by a man. Okay? Not only was I raised with my father every single day, but I have a twin brother. So that male protection being different than male control. And a woman who didn't grow up with a loving dad, a protective, loving dad, they don't know the difference. And they can get caught up in a relationship with a man who's really trying to control them in the name of love and protection when it's not. It's manipulation. So for me, I'm somebody who will get out of a relationship quick, fast when I see that type of manipulation and issues, because I'm smarter than that. I don't have these daddy issues, okay? And my dad taught me to be a free-thinking, independent woman. A lot of people look at independent women like that's a bad word. I had an ex in the past who kept saying, he always said that to me sarcastically. Like I never said to him, I'm an independent woman or whatever. But he would always sarcastically make these comments. And it's like, I don't know what man would teach his daughter that she should grow up being with the goal of being dependent on a man, with the goal of just sitting around doing nothing with her life, waiting for a man to come take care of her. That's bad advice. That gets you caught up in all kinds of abusive, dangerous ass, miserable situations, right? And no matter what I might have gone through in relationships and, issues with men romantically, what has always kept me sane and grounded is the fact that my dad loves me. Okay, not just my dad, you know, both of my parents, but my dad loves me, and my dad is one of my biggest fans. And my dad always, you know, has told me to stand strong in who I am. You know what I'm saying? And you know, it's there's a lot of men who like the other thing too is that what I've noticed in the black community is that a lot of men who have this animosity towards single mothers, or women in general, they usually were raised by a single mom. And you see that in hip hop all the time. Rappers who talk so, like even with Biggie, the way he used to talk about women. I used to, listening to Biggie, I used to always think he sounds like he really don't like women. You know, he said a lot of unnecessary nasty shit. Like Biggie said, I'd rather fuck RuPaul than them ugly ass escape bitches. Like, why would he say that about young black women? Why? And you rather fuck RuPaul than escape? How gay is that? And that's like such female hatred. You know what I'm saying? Then Biggie was beating up Little Kim and Faith. Like, that ugly dude should have been happy that any woman wanted to be near him. I'm sorry. But people turn a blind eye to that type of stuff. And he was raised by a single mom. And all of the majority of men who I see get caught up in dumb shit, their father wasn't there. So Biggie was selling crack out of his mother's house and she had no clue. Then he was dead by 25, or probably before that, right? So the mothers who are raising sons by themselves, black moms who might try to be more strict to keep their sons out of that trouble, I've heard conversations from black men where they're going on and on and on about how they don't date black women because they were raised by a single mother and she was so mean to them. Bitch ass shit. And it's like, if you had a father in the house, if you think your mother's discipline, your single black mother who was trying to keep you safe, that was too much. Imagine if you were raised with a dad, because most people who I know who had a mother and father in the house, the father was the scarier one. Mothers would usually say, I'm going to tell your father. You didn't really hear father say, I'm going to tell your mother. It's, I'm going to tell your father. Like, that's a higher level of discipline. And kids need to be afraid of something. So I feel like boys a lot of times who don't have a dad in their life, who's on their ass, they end up being bitch ass about a lot of shit. And no offense, and I'm sorry, but I'm just saying, and I'm not saying all, but I'm saying a lot, right? And then they project that onto women. So I'm going to say that, you know, hearing these conversations about, oh, we need to cancel Father's Day celebrations in the black community because all the, you know, so many black kids don't have a father. No. We're not canceling. I don't believe in canceling Father's Day celebrations anywhere. Not in the schools, not nowhere. Okay? I also, you know, hear a lot of black men bitching and complaining about, oh, people don't do as much for Father's Day as they do for Mother's Day. And most of the men who complain about that didn't have a dad themselves. Right? And it's like, well, I mean, so many people didn't have a father. So that's why you see that. But then a lot of us did. And I'll praise my dad any day of the week. I love talking about my dad. Sometimes I feel like I want to write a whole book on the things that my father taught me. You know what I'm saying? I want to write a whole book on this shit. And my dad was always pointing out women in positions of power to me. Always. And not just black women, all women who are in positions of power. My dad went on the Geraldo show in 1990 to debate that idiot Shahrazad Ali. And I've been seeing her resurfacing in the past couple years. I don't respect any man, okay? I don't respect any man who is quoting Shahrazad Ali. Okay? That bitch was saying that black men need to slap women in the face and was promoting domestic abuse. If you look at the Geraldo, and I'll probably post it when I'm done with this. If you look at the Geraldo show that my dad was on in 1990, where he was debating, standing up for black women and saying that shit is bullshit. The men that were in the audience on that show, all of them, every single last one who stood up in defense of Shahrazad Ali, they not only did they look like a woman beater, but they were talking about it and justifying it and comparing it to disciplining kids. Women are not kids. Women are grown-ass adults. Disciplining a kid is not the same thing as trying to discipline a grown person and your wife and your woman. So I'm not with that shit at all. Okay? And so I grew up watching my dad stand up for black women. Stand up for women, period. My dad was heavily involved in the civil rights movement. He was a black radical. He was a part of the organization that strategically put the Black Panthers together. It was called RAM, Revolutionary Action Movement. He wasn't a Black Panther. He was a part of the organization that preceded them and strategically put them together. Okay? And my dad told me, one of his mentors, my dad just turned 80 last month. One of his mentors was a woman named Queen Mother Moore. Queen Mother Moore is a very important figure in the civil rights movement that a lot of people don't know unless they really know history. And she was in her 50s when my dad was like 20 years old, right? And my dad said to me, most of the men who were involved in the movement, they were very machismo. They didn't want to hear shit a woman had to say. They didn't respect it. But when Queen Mother spoke, they all were quiet and they listened. And my dad made me very much aware of the fact that a lot of these black men who are so pro-black and down for the cause, they don't respect women. They don't respect black women. They don't want to hear what you got to say. And my dad wasn't like that. So for me, even when I come across these black men who are, so pro-black and so powerful to the people, a lot of times I don't fuck with them either, because a lot of them, they're like that all day, but they don't care about black women. They want to talk about how hard it is being a black man. They don't think about how hard it is being a black woman. And some of them think that being a black woman is easier. And that's not true. Black women have challenges because we are women, okay? So there's this challenge of just being a woman in a man's world. A lot of black men still benefit from male privilege, okay? But black men, I don't even like the debate about who has it the hardest. I don't even like that, because there's different challenges in both ends. And depending on what industry you're talking about and what situation you're talking about, sometimes it's easier to be a black woman, sometimes it's easier to be a black man, right? But we both have challenges, and I don't like the rhetoric that I get from a lot of pro-black men, like, oh, it's easy being a black woman, and they have like this animosity towards us. And a lot of those dudes didn't have no damn father, okay? And I just find that, it's like, I'm from Harlem, I'm from the hood. Like I said, I have a twin brother. He never sold drugs. He never went to jail. Never got caught up in no shit. And a lot of people I know whose father was in the house with them every single day on their ass, those are the ones that usually didn't get caught up in the dumb shit. Even one of my friends, he's from Miami. He told me when he was a kid, he's in his 50s. He told me he was a kid. He used to be looking out the window at the kids that were outside all night hanging out. And he used to say he wished he didn't have a dad, because his dad wouldn't allow him to do that. All the kids that was out past when they were supposed to do, ripping around the street, their dad wasn't present. When people that had dads in the house that gave a fuck put their foot down, I was like, you keeping your ass right here. And you know what? It kept them out of trouble. So fathers are incredibly important, but I'm not with the over-empathizing and making excuses for dads who don't do what the fuck they're supposed to do. And I get tired in the black community of people always, it's the white man did this and all this conspiracy and that conspiracy. That might be like 5% of the absentee fathers. I think a lot of people just don't want to come to grips with the fact that their dad didn't give a fuck about them. Like, you had a shitty ass dad, and it wasn't because of white supremacy or anything else. And hold him accountable, because people still want to see stars in their eyes with this asshole father that didn't ever care about them. And their whole life, they're still trying to make their father love them and doing things for this man that didn't do anything for you when you needed him. I'm not with that shit. I will do anything for my father. Anything. My goal is for him to live to 100. So I do, when it comes to his health, I'm always on him. I teach him things. I'll put shit in the kitchen, like, you're not going to cook with canola oil, you're going to cook with this tallow and this ghee. You know what I'm saying? To make sure he stays healthy. But there's nothing my father could ask me for that I wouldn't do for him. I remember being a little girl. I remember being 3 years old. And my dad was annoying. He got on my nerves. He got on people's nerves. And I remember being 3 years old and thinking to myself, my dad, when he gets old, he's going to be even more annoying. And no one's going to want to deal with him. But I love my dad, and I don't want to put him in a home. So I wanted to own a house and have a basement so I could put him in the basement. So he didn't get on my nerves, but he wasn't in a home. I'm thinking that at 3 years old, okay? That's how much I love my dad. I would do anything for him. But my dad deserves it, because my dad was there every single day of my life. He taught me so much, okay? He made me, my brother and I read all the time. Whenever we gave gifts to people, it didn't matter if they were children, adults, or elderly. Whenever we gave gifts to people, we had to give them books, okay? My dad instilled the love of reading, into and the importance of researching and getting your facts straight before you start talking about some shit. Research it thoroughly and get your facts straight before you open your mouth. That came from my dad. And when there are people who've been following me on social media and they didn't know they know who my dad is, but they didn't know that was my dad. And they find that out, they're like, oh wow, no wonder. Or there's people who didn't know my dad and they meet him and they're like, oh wow, like now I see where you get it from. My dad is a very intelligent man, one of the smartest people I've ever met. And he has zero tolerance for idiots and people who don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And so do I. But I watched my dad as a kid, and I was always amazed at his intelligence. I used to want to study neuroscience because I'm like, I want to study his brain. And my dad had a friend who passed away who was a big time scientist at Harvard, black male scientist. He passed away a couple years ago. His name is Dr. Alan Counter. But he was a PhD, MD, and he wanted to study my dad's brain. Okay, neuroscience is one of his fields. So it's like I would watch my dad growing up and think to myself, I don't want to have like the super negative attributes that he has. Like his temper can be very short when it comes to like people just don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And he was on the radio in New York for years, and if you called up his show when you were just talking dumb shit, he'd just hang up on you. Now, I'm like that too. I'm like a calmer version of him. You know, I try to carry on certain of his mission, but on the female side of things, but my expertise is different. My dad is an expert when it comes to world history, politics, religion, the arts, stuff like that, right? And that's what we share in common, is that we're both into the arts, except my dad has a greater appreciation for, like, I'm not into like museum art and like abstract art paintings, and I'm not a fan of theater, and I'm not a fan of like listening to classical music or jazz, but I grew up around classical music and jazz. Hold on, I have to sneeze. Whew. Hold on a second. Excuse me. Hold on. Sorry. Okay. I grew up around classical music, jazz, going to theater, going to museums. I'm more into dance, okay? That's the art form that I'm into. And I'm into music to a degree, but I'm not a fan of like jazz, unless it's Latin jazz or jazz in New Orleans. And not really a big fan of classical music, even though I studied ballet and stuff like it's cool, but you'll never see me play it. My dad grew up in the South playing instruments, so he has a greater appreciation for music than I do, you know. But there's so many things that, you know, he taught me. I really could write a book on it. And so I understand, you know, I've always focused on the importance of fathers for daughters, but like I said, after being in relationships with men who had bad relationships with their dads, I saw how it could affect them too. Like there are men who I know who didn't have a dad in their life and they turned out okay because they did the inner work to be good fathers and be good men. But there are a lot of men that have daddy issues who are just deeply damaged individuals, right? And they have all kinds of self-esteem problems and all kinds of, you know, this problem and that problem. And it's to the point where I just feel like I don't even want to deal with a man anymore who has a bad relationship with his dad. But that's kind of hard because I feel like there's so many people. And in the black community, even though I can say that that wasn't my experience in my world with my family, but so many black people I meet, like their dad wasn't shit. Their dad wasn't there. Their dad was on bullshit. And if I ever saw my dad put his hands on my mother, I wouldn't fuck with him, okay? There's no way. If I ever saw my dad beat my mother up, that would be something that would be unforgivable to me. So you have a lot of men who love their dad, but their dad beat their mother. And then their dad left them and left them to fend for themselves. Okay? That type of father to me is not an honorable man. You know what I'm saying? And so I just think it further perpetuates this idea that somehow, you know, the pressures of society kept their dad away. No, your dad just didn't have his priorities in order. So I just want to say Happy Father's Day to all of the men out there who are being fathers to their kids, okay, and doing what they're supposed to do. I want to say to any woman, okay, who's salty at a man because you broke up with him or he cheated on you, whatever, and you're trying to keep your child from his father, that shit is not cool at all. And you should go to hell for that shit if you believe in that, okay? And I would never be friends with a woman or co-sign on that type of behavior. But I also would never co-sign on the behavior of men who choose not to be in their children's lives and be present fathers. So important. So important. And this idea, this whole conversation about, it just annoys me when I hear black people saying that they think that Father's Day celebration should be canceled in the schools because it triggers black kids and it's bad for their psyche. The hell with that. What about Mother's Day? There's people that don't got mothers. My mom grew up without a mom. My mother's mother, her mother died when she was 4 years old. And she told me that back then, if you didn't have a mother on Mother's Day, I think you had to wear like a yellow flower or something, so everybody knew you didn't have a mom. And it was super depressing and triggering. Mother's Day can be triggering. It can be triggering for women who lost their babies. It can be triggering for people who just recently lost their mother, people who never had a mother, people whose mother died, whatever. So any holiday can be triggering. Does that mean we need to cancel all the holidays because it can trigger people? No. So I definitely don't agree with this, let's cancel Father's Day celebrations because a lot of black in the schools because a lot of black kids don't have fathers. That's bullshit. But you're hearing this conversation in the black community, and then you're hearing this other conversation of people complaining that they don't see enough Father's Day celebrations. Well, the reason why you don't see enough Father's Day celebrations, a lot of people don't have a freaking father that's worth a shit. And there are times on Father's Day when I've been around people where nobody had anything good to say about their dad. And I almost felt, and I've been in relationships with men who were jealous of my relationship with my dad. Like they were like low-key jealous. That's a problem. That is definitely a problem. You know what I'm saying? And so black men need to hold other black men accountable who are not taking care of their kids and not in their kids' lives. That's not something that women can fix. And I can say that the bulk of the problems, forget about talking about white supremacy, the bulk of the problems in the black community come from black fathers not being there. Most of these black men running around shooting up the hood, not caring about life, doing dumb shit, they don't have a father. Or their father is also a piece of shit who's also running around the street doing gang shit and stuff like that. So other black men need to start holding black men accountable. If you have friends who you know are just like there's dudes I know that have kids and they choose to run around the country doing whatever, chasing women around instead of being there present in their kids' life, and nobody is stopping them from doing that. Their priorities are just somewhere else. Other men need to hold those men accountable and call them out. Period, point blank. Period, point blank. You know? And so I just want to say, my heart goes out to those who don't have a good relationship with their fathers. I think that people need to, work on healing those wounds and doing the inner work. I want to say happy Father's Day to all of the great fathers out there. And I will one day, I have these other businesses that I'm working on because I have books I want to write, but I don't have time to write books because I have to pay bills and I'm just busy. But one book that I definitely want to write is what I learned from my father, okay? Like Obama wrote The Lessons My Father Taught Me or something like that. I want to write a book like that because there's so much that he taught me. And he has so much to do with the type of woman that I am. And a lot of people don't understand me, what I'm about, and what I come from, And so I just feel the need to just write this stuff because I feel like it's important. And I can say that, having my father in my life, like I said, it taught me the difference between a man protecting me and a man controlling me. And I have a respect for male protection. Men and women have different things that we're tuned into. I think women are more tuned into spiritual protection in the spiritual realm, an energy that's not good for you. And I feel like men are more tuned into physical protection and dangers. I remember being a little girl and getting on the train in New York with my dad, and my dad said to me, "Makeda, sit here." Right? And I went and sat. I was trying to go sit somewhere else, and he was like, "Sit here." He said it very sternly, like, "Sit down." So then I sat where he told me, and he sat next to me, and my dad said to me, "Listen, when I'm telling you to sit someplace, just do what I'm saying, because I see shit that you don't see. And he pointed out these men that were on the other side of the car. They were doing something really suspect. I didn't even notice the shit. But my dad noticed it, which is why he told me to sit where he told me to sit. And that always stayed in my mind since my childhood. So as an adult, when I'm around men, I notice that if any male friends come to visit me, they'd be locking. I could have 3-4 locks on my door. Every male friend that comes to visit me, they'd be locking all my locks. I don't even lock all those locks. I might lock 1 or 2 of them. Any dudes that be around me, they be locking all the locks. As soon as they come in, they be looking at the locks on my window. And, I have one friend, in New York who he's, he's a sex crimes NYPD officer. And he's always concerned about my safety. He's always telling me about this gadget, and you should get this gadget, and you should do this, like a safety thing. Like I told you, my dad has been giving me razors and knives. And because I'm from New York, we can't really have guns. But when I moved to Atlanta, he wanted me to learn how to shoot. He wanted me to get a gun. Like, my dad has always been, like, super concerned about my safety when it comes to men. My mother has never talked to me about that. Sometimes my mom would get uncomfortable when my dad is telling me how to cut a dude and where to cut a dude and how to seriously injure a man. Giving me these lessons for years. And I don't even like knives and razors. My dad would be like, when you're walking home at night, just have it out, okay? So that you don't got to get ready. You are ready. Just have it out. And you could just hold your hand down here behind you. Somebody comes up to you, grabs you, this is what you do. And my mother would be uncomfortable with the shit. And my mother gets on my nerves because I'm like, he's a man. That's what he's supposed to do, is teach me these things. That didn't come from my mother. It came from my father. And when I hear people saying that men can't be expressive, black men can't cry and all this stuff, I'm like, I've seen my dad cry way more than my mother. And my dad is a tough dude, okay? My dad is a tough man. But I've seen him cry more than my mom. My dad is a sentimental, just like we all seen DMX cry. DMX wasn't no weak ass dude. Probably seen Mike Tyson cry, and he ain't no weak ass dude. So this idea that men can't cry, I'm like, what are you talking about? You know what I'm saying? I grew up watching, my dad is very expressive in his love. My dad is sentimental, okay? But he was also ready to die for the cause when he was younger. And at 80 years old, just now when I was in New York, we were on the train in New York, he was sitting on the train, like this weird, weird stuff has been happening on the train in New York lately. So this weird homeless man started to kind of come towards us. And I size people up real quick and be thinking about what I'm going to do if this person comes too close. So I was looking at this dude. I sized him up. He looked weak and frail. And I'm thinking if he tries anything, I'll kick him dead in his stomach. Because he ain't stronger than my legs. So that's what I was thinking. But then the man kind of went this way. And then my dad, he was sitting there with his book bag on his lap. And he lifted it up to show me that my dad was sitting on the train with this razor already out, ready to cut somebody if he had to. He just sitting there with it on his lap with his book bag over it, just sitting there looking like an innocent old man. Because I'm sure that being 80 years old, there was a time when my dad was younger, he could fight, he was strong. Now that when you're getting older, you might lose that. So you might think, I can't be getting in a fight with young dudes, so I gotta cut somebody or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But he's about that safety shit. Period. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just saying, I love my dad. I wish I was with him today, but I'll be going to New York in a few days. I'm going to cook for him. I'm going to love on him. There's nothing that I wouldn't do for my father. I am definitely a daddy's girl. I understand the importance of fathers. And I could just talk about my dad all day, but I'm going to stop because, But happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. And I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.